I'm Bella. Sitting here in the FBI field office in Boston, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what just happened. The fluorescent lights hum, and the air is thick with the smell of coffee. I can't believe that a simple work trip to London turned into a nightmare of corporate espionage and identity theft. It all started on a rainy Thursday evening when I boarded Flight 447 from New York to London. I'm a cyber security engineer at a tech startup called CyberSafe. My boss had hand-picked me to represent our company at an international cyber security conference. It was my first international work trip, and I was both nervous and excited. I was raised by my mom, Clara. She's a former police officer, and she instilled in me a strong sense of discipline and caution. She always told me to trust my gut and to respect those with more experience. Growing up, our home was a place of order. Every rule had a reason, and I was taught to follow them without question. As I made my way down the aisle of the packed plane, I was assigned seat 14B, a middle seat. It was the only available seat when our company's travel coordinator, Lisa, booked the flight just 3 days ago. I settled into my seat, squeezed past a college-aged guy in 14A who had his headphones on and was half asleep, and stowed my carry-on in the overhead bin. I pulled out my book, trying to relax. That's when a flight attendant named Grace approached with a drink cart. She was in her late 50s, with a kind face and a calm, reassuring presence. Grace leaned down and placed a small folded napkin on my tray table. I looked down and saw 5 words written in blue pen: switch seats. Don't ask questions. Before I could even look up, she was already walking away with her cart. My heart started pounding. I glanced around, and no one seemed to notice. I looked back at Grace. She was standing near the galley. When our eyes met, she gave me a tiny nod and glanced towards the back of the plane. Row 22, an empty window seat. I was frozen, the napkin in my hand, my mind racing. Flight attendants don't usually ask passengers to switch seats without a reason. I thought about my mom's words. When someone with experience tells you to act, you act first and ask questions later. So, I grabbed my bag and quietly made my way to the back of the plane. I slid into seat 22A and buckled up. My hands were shaking. Grace appeared almost immediately with a blanket. She leaned down and whispered, "Thank you. Stay here. Don't go back." Then she was gone, continuing down the aisle as if nothing had happened. I sat there, trying to process what had just happened. I looked back at row 14. A man who I'd noticed earlier, sitting in 17C, was now standing in the aisle. He looked uncomfortable, wearing a wrinkled suit and sweating, even though the cabin was cool. He was clutching a leather briefcase like it was the most precious thing in the world. He sat down in my old seat, 14B, and placed the briefcase carefully under the seat in front of him, gripping it tightly. My stomach dropped. Why had Grace moved me away from him? The plane's engines started, and the flight attendants began the safety demonstration. I couldn't focus on any of it. All I could do was stare at the back of the man's head. He was tense, gripping the armrest so hard that his knuckles were white. About 30 minutes into the flight, the man suddenly pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking so badly that he almost dropped it. He started typing frantically, then stopped and stared at his phone. His face went pale, and he looked around the cabin wildly. He stood up abruptly, bumping into the college kid next to him, and mumbled that he needed the bathroom. He grabbed his briefcase and rushed towards the back of the plane. That's when Grace appeared next to me. She crouched down and whispered, "That man was supposed to sit next to someone specific on this flight. We received an anonymous tip before boarding that a passenger in seat 14B was being targeted for something illegal. We didn't have time to verify the information without causing a panic, so I moved you. You can't let him know you were supposed to be in that seat." My mouth went dry. Targeted? What do you mean? I asked. Grace glanced towards the bathroom and said, "We believe he's transporting something illegal, and someone on this plane is supposed to receive it from him. If you'd stayed in that seat, you might have been mistaken for his contact or set up to take the fall. The bathroom door opened, and the man came out. He looked even worse than before. His shirt was soaked with sweat, and his hands were trembling as he carried the briefcase back to his seat. He sat down and started typing on his phone again. Then he looked at the college kid next to him and said, "Urgent. You're supposed to give me the signal. You're in 14B, right?" The college kid looked at him like he was crazy and said, "Dude, I'm in 14A. I don't know you." The man's face turned red, and his breathing got faster. He stood up and started shouting, "She told me to sit in 14B. The woman who was supposed to be here is gone. Where is she?" The cabin erupted into chaos. Passengers were standing up, some shouting for the man to calm down, others recording the scene on their phones. A mother pulled her child closer, and an older man stood up as if ready to help. That's when a man stood up from first class. He was wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt, but there was something about the way he moved that was different. He walked down the aisle with confidence and flashed a badge. "FBI. I'll take it from here," he said. My heart nearly stopped. There was an FBI agent on the plane. Grace stepped aside, and the agent, Agent Diaz, looked at the panicking man and said, "Sir, I'm Agent Diaz. You need to sit down and hand over the briefcase." The man looked at the agent, then at the briefcase, and said, "No, I have to deliver this. I was paid to deliver it to the woman in 14B, Bella. They'll kill me if I don't." Hearing my name come out of his mouth sent a chill down my spine. Agent Diaz nodded and said, "The woman you're looking for isn't here. We moved her. Your contact isn't coming. Now sit down and hand over the briefcase." The man looked around desperately. There was nowhere to go. His shoulders sagged, and he started crying. "They're going to kill me. I took their money," he sobbed. But he still wouldn't let go of the briefcase. Agent Diaz moved closer and said, "Give me the briefcase. I can protect you if you cooperate." The man hesitated, then slowly handed over the briefcase. Grace came to me again and said, "I need you to come with me to the galley. Bring your bag." I followed her, feeling every eye in the cabin on me. In the galley, Agent Diaz set the briefcase on the counter and said, "I'm going to open this. I need you to tell me if you recognize anything." He opened the briefcase, and inside were stacks of cash, dozens of USB drives, and 3 passports. He pulled out one of the passports. The photo inside was of a woman who looked like me, but it wasn't me. The name on the passport was mine, Bella. Agent Diaz said, "You've been identity cloned. Someone was supposed to board this flight using your name and seat assignment to receive this package." I was in shock. "Why me?" I asked. Agent Diaz said, "We think someone hacked your company's travel system or that Lisa, your travel coordinator, is involved. They're part of a corporate espionage ring selling stolen data." Grace put her hand on my shoulder and said, "We're diverting to Boston. Agent Diaz will take the man into custody, and you'll need to come with us to give a statement at the FBI office." The plane began its descent into Boston. Through the galley curtain, I could see the man sitting in seat 14B, his head in his hands, with 2 off-duty police officers on either side of him. The college kid had been moved to a different seat and looked terrified. Grace stayed close to me and said, "You did the right thing trusting me. If you'd ignored the note, we wouldn't have been able to separate you from him without alerting whoever was watching." I asked her, "How did you know?" She smiled tiredly and said, 25 years of flying, you develop instincts. That man was acting strange from the moment he boarded, and when I saw multiple seat changes for your reservation in 24 hours, I knew something was wrong. I called it in, and Agent Diaz confirmed there was an active investigation. The plane touched down in Boston. Police vehicles were waiting on the tarmac. The forward door opened, and FBI agents boarded the plane. They arrested the man, read him his rights, and sealed the briefcase as evidence. Agent Diaz turned to me and said, "Miss Bella, we need you to come with us. It's going to be a long night, but we need all the information you can give us about Lisa and your company's security systems." I grabbed my bag and followed him off the plane. Grace walked with me to the door and squeezed my hand. "You're going to be okay," she said. At the FBI field office, Agent Diaz and another agent, Agent Rose, sat me down in a conference room. For the next 3 hours, I told them everything about Lisa, how she'd booked all my work trips for the past 2 years and had access to all my personal information. Agent Diaz opened his laptop and said, "We've been investigating a corporate espionage ring for 8 months. Companies have been losing proprietary data, and we couldn't figure out how it was being transported. 3 weeks ago, we got a tip that the next transfer was on this flight, seat 14B, passenger Bella." He showed me a photo of a woman who looked like me going through airport security with a briefcase. "This woman has used your identity 4 times in the past 6 months, flying to different destinations with stolen data. We didn't know she wasn't the real you until your passport was scanned at JFK." Agent Rose said, "We believe Lisa is part of a larger network. She identifies employees with travel schedules, clones their identities, and uses look-alikes to transport the stolen data. You were chosen because you travel internationally for work and have security clearance." Agent Diaz also told me that they'd been monitoring the man, Jake, for 2 weeks. He was just a courier, paid to deliver the briefcase. He had no idea he was part of an espionage operation. I asked, "Is the woman still out there using my name?" Agent Diaz nodded and said, "She is, but not for long. We've been building this case for months, and tonight gave us everything we needed. We executed a search warrant at Lisa's home an hour ago." Just then, Agent Rose's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and smiled. "They got her. Lisa is in custody." Relief washed over me. Agent Diaz said, "The USB drives contain stolen cyber security protocols from your company worth millions of dollars. If the fake Bella had received the briefcase in London, the data would be in the hands of a foreign tech company by now, and you'd be facing federal charges." I realized how close I'd come to having my life destroyed. If Grace hadn't moved me, I'd be in handcuffs right now. Agent Rose slid a business card across the table and said, "You'll need to stay in Boston for a few days. We'll need more statements, and you might have to testify at the trial. We've contacted your mom, and she's flying up first thing in the morning." Hearing that my mom was coming, I finally broke down. All the fear and shock of the past few hours came crashing down. Agent Rose handed me a box of tissues and waited patiently. 2 agents drove me to a hotel near the airport at 3 o'clock in the morning. They posted security outside my room. I sat on the bed, still in my flight clothes, and stared at my phone. There were 15 missed calls from my mom, 8 texts from my boss, and 6 from co-workers asking if I was okay. I called my mom. She answered on the first ring. "Bella, thank God. Are you okay? They told me you're safe, but I need to hear your voice." I started crying again. "I'm okay, Mom. It's over." Her voice cracked. "I'm getting on the first flight out. Don't go anywhere without the agents." The next morning, my mom arrived at the hotel before I even woke up. She pulled me into a tight hug, and for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt truly safe. We spent the whole day in the FBI office. Agent Diaz walked us through everything they'd discovered. Lisa had confessed within hours of being arrested. She'd been running this operation for almost 3 years, making over $2 million selling corporate secrets. The woman using my identity, Stella, was arrested at an airport in Frankfurt, Germany, trying to board another flight with a briefcase full of stolen pharmaceutical research. She'd been paid $50,000 each time she successfully transported data using someone else's identity. Jake got a plea deal in exchange for his full cooperation. He was sentenced to 3 years in a minimum security prison. Lisa, on the other hand, was charged with corporate espionage, identity theft, fraud, and a dozen other federal crimes and was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. After the trial, I decided to leave CyberSafe. Every time I walked into the office, I'd think about Lisa sitting at her desk, selling my identity. I took 3 months off to process everything, staying with my mom at her place outside New York. My mom helped me see that I'd survived because I'd trusted my instincts and listened to Grace. "You could have ignored the note, but you trusted her, and that trust saved your life," she said. Grace and I became good friends. I flew to New York a month after everything settled down, and we met for coffee. She told me she'd been scared that moving me without official clearance could have gotten her fired, but she couldn't just stand by. I started my own security consulting business, specializing in helping companies identify internal vulnerabilities and protect against corporate espionage. My first major client was an airline company, and I worked with flight attendants, teaching them the same instincts Grace had used. The experience changed me. I'm more cautious now, checking my credit reports regularly and monitoring my passport activity. I changed all my passwords and set up alerts for any unusual account activity. I keep Grace's original note, the napkin that said, "Switch seats. Don't ask questions," framed in my home office. It's not a reminder of fear but of courage. It represents a stranger who saw danger and chose to act, and a passenger who trusted that stranger's warning. That's the difference between disaster and survival sometimes. One person who cares enough to act and another person who's willing to listen.